Hello, I am Radagast at your service. And this is Mystic Brew Shot on November 28th, and we're going to call it Organic Copyright or Organic Copyrights. I'm calling it a brew shot because I'm trying to make this Mystic Brew a little shorter, like a shot size glass of information instead of my normal often hour-long videos. I often set out to do 20 minutes to half an hour, and then I'm done recording, and I see it's 58 minutes or 45. And I'm going to try and be a little more concise. So this Mystic Brew Shot is about organic copyright, and I want to explain it. And part of it is also in creating a real dynamic community, and also where much of how we take in our information is now coming from alternative news websites, alternative sites, even if they're not news, and then just the various group of YouTubers who some have really huge subscription bases, and the fact that we speak to you regularly and we try to create a conversation, and sometimes even lead it if we think it'll lead into something productive. And I will say at the outset that I've had this as a concept. I've spoken about it. I've even kind of did it in a mystic view when I spoke of my new paradigm production, as I was putting like a little bit of an organic trademark on those terms, and only because it's a project that I'm doing, and I'll explain that a little bit. But I've also been inspired by one of the YouTubers and voices in our community, who's Kara St. Louis. And Kara St. Louis is putting a lot of time and effort into bringing us good information, and probably based on not only historical research. I'm quite sure all of us now at the level we are, we certainly get intuition, we get downloads, so to speak, or we get connected into pockets of material that kind of just seem to come with information we bring, and they kind of fit in, and there's this really nice marriage that expands the story without necessarily having documentation for it. Obviously, documentation satisfies many, and then I think that those of us who are introducing our intuition into it, we can always mention that. It's not a problem. But anyway, Kara St. Louis is doing the Fae, all right? And I know and I think she has a legitimate point. I've been somebody who has been on a newsletter for John Lash and his Gaia Navigation Experiment since like 2010, if not before. And, him developing that material. Now, as a modern person, like in the age of the internet, the person who brought the term archon into our lexicon was John Lash. Now he got the term. The term has been around for thousands of years, but he got it from the Gnostic text. But because he was another person who kind of brought a new synthesis of the various information about the Gnostics, because not all of it comes from the Gnostic texts. A lot of Gnostic texts were burned. When the Cathars were exterminated in southern France, much of the material and books that were burned with them were Gnostic materials. So John Lash kind of, in his bringing together that material, identified a non-organic being called an archon. And he even speaks of their genesis, how they got here, and how lost they are, the trouble that they create for humanity. So anyway, the whole concept of archon and the fact that they were extra-dimensional beings and interact with human beings was I don't know of any other source. I've never seen another source besides John Lamb Lash for that. And he spoke about it in one of his recent things that he sent out to people on his newsletter. And he was just saying, it would be kind of nice. He's not like angry about it. Because he's secure that he knows who brought archon into our lexicon. And he just thinks it would be kind of nice if, at least minimally, people would acknowledge for the man who introduced them to this concept that they bandy about, and maybe even create some distance when they're creating the archons, like almost as like the same as jinn or demons, and like they're kind of lumping them into a category that John definitely does not, nor do I. I see Jinn as quite separate, as like, let's call it an extra dimensional race from the Archons. All right. So anyway, but he just thinks it would be kind of nice if people would either acknowledge him, or at least when they use the Archons, even use it in the way that they were given, instead of just taking this concept, adding it into their little basket of extra dimensional boogeymen or boogie people, and then waving them around. And it just everybody's entitled to their own interpretation. But when you're kind of getting something from a source, and then you just do whatever you want with it because it's hot. Oh, everybody's talking about the Archons. Got to bring the Archons in. And again, there's a lot of that very typical kind of follow the market type stuff. So anyway, the Fae, F-A-E, which is where we get the word fairy, is a race of beings, and Kara St. Louis is bringing out this information. I look forward to it. Like, I have 2 things to listen to from her because she put them out in the last couple of days. I haven't had a chance to listen to it. And so again, so she wants to separate them. She wants to get it clear who they are. Make the break with the Disney fairy and stuff like that. Really, really good work. And so anyway, I can kind of get off the subject of the Fae because I didn't come here to talk about the Fae. I came to talk about organic copyright. So let's say Kara starts putting out some stuff, and I have been getting some information about the Fae. I'd love to have a conversation with her about it. But it's still kind of knocking around, and I have the feeling when I listen to Kara, things are going to start congealing, and I'm going to start getting some of my own stuff. So but again, since she's covering it, I might be content. But if I ever feel like I have an opinion or something that excites me, and especially with regards to let's call it the different timeline that gets identified in Anatoly Fomenko's work, has been beautifully mentioned in Sylvie of New Earth and all of her the Survivors of Atlantis series and the ones that follow. I mean, you have to, and I recommend you start with number 1. I think it's the Atlantis of When the Atlantis Survivors Woke Up, something like that. But the YouTube channel is New Earth. By the way, Kara St. Louis's YouTube channel is Hard True, 2 separate words: Hard, H-A-R-D, True, T-R-U-E. You might want to go there. Kara is a very interesting and intelligent woman, and she's one of the voices. She has something to say, and some people are a lot more prolific posters. I'm trying to be a more prolific poster. I sometimes will wait on Kara longer than I'd like to, but she's a mom, and she's dealing with quite a lot of stuff, raising a family. It's kind of that is a fairly full-time job. But with organic copyright, so part of it is kind of where, usually with a copyright, if somebody uses your stuff, you can either say no or you have to pay me something. So I'm trying to get into the organic thing on, let's call a return on investment, okay, by redefining what that return is. Now, my little organic copyright is on a concept called new paradigm production. And for me, what I mean by new paradigm production is creating the psychology almost, and then and also the connection to source that allows us to work together and create a truly new paradigm, which to me is only new because if it might have existed, but it has to be rebuilt. But to me, it can be rebuilt in a way that it actually exceeds and in fact is a new paradigm. And its production is about inspiration, idea insertion, and of course some real seeing some of those ideas take place. And I'm involved in a bunch of other things with the possible purchase of a property. I'd like to. We'll see if it goes on, and the creating of a unique community on that property, self-sustaining in the sense that it actually has quote unquote industry of some sort, and I don't mean building smokestack industry. I mean, a great group of seamstresses putting on a line of clothing would be an industry. People doing really good leather work. Obviously, the vegans won't be interested, but and I don't mean that disparagingly. I mean that by acknowledging the vegans. And So anyway, I'm involved in my own kind of new paradigm production. And the whole thing, I'm actually just trying to insert it in a meme. And if anybody is inspired by that and gets what I mean by new paradigm production and realizes that right now, as I'm reading or even listening to Alex Jones, and just listening to the many people who are speaking, and to me, what I'm going to call freedom, sovereign-based language. And for me, when I'm hearing this language, I'm not hearing an ism forming. I'm hearing people hearing the same inner voice. That like, as if like, oh my God, you're saying what I would have said that in basically those same words. And these are, and this language is about who we are, what we're going to do, what is, and as if like we all kind of see basically the same things that are wrong with the world, and what those reparations and how we move back into the created in creation. That, you know, there is a complete identification with being part of the divine, with having that true awakening is to awaken to the fact that you now realize your connection. You have a real-time connection with it, and that your communication with it doesn't give you things to tell other people to do, it tells you what to do. Okay, it's really a personal relationship. But the way to share that personal relationship is in how we interact with others, especially in real life and doing things, and creating a new paradigm, the production of a new paradigm based on people hearing a voice that's unique to them, that there's a certain amount of work they'll be doing themselves, there's a certain amount of work they'll be doing with others, but it's almost pre-coordinated because we're coming from this, where all of the possibilities that we represent start getting some structure, basically where there's a part of us, of a greater self, of the source, of the creator. It's going, you know, if you did this and you did this and you did this and you did this, we could make this. And so each person gets there, you could do this. And then through synchronicity, by setting out to do it, all of a sudden somebody shows up and go, you know, I know somebody, you go, really? And then you connect with them and you realize you're off to the races. So that's new paradigm production. And so I think I can be able to wrap this up pretty quickly. So, but what part of this, the return on investment. So part of the return on investment to me, I don't want to monetize it. It's not that there's absolutely no case where somebody might license something because maybe there's a whole bunch of stuff. And it's like, you know what, you could kick a little of that back to me. But the most important thing, like in other words, with my new paradigm production, if my return on investment is seeing people producing a new paradigm, coordinating with other people, understanding that they're hearing an inner voice that coordinates with other inner voices, and that's how the inner coordinates with the outer through us working together. And so for me, so like, let's say in the future event, this is a hypothetical, I decide I have something to say on the Fae. I would start with, first of all, acknowledging Kara St. Louis. I would acknowledge her YouTube site. I would acknowledge that she said this inspired me, and I came up with this on as like a kind of my own extrapolation. But in other words, so not only do I acknowledge her as being my inspiration, I also would be acknowledging where you can find her to get it, go to the source. And then, because you might listen to her, and then you say my extrapolation, oh, Mod Wiz, you were like, where'd you come up with that stuff? So, and it also allows me to give a shout out. I'd like to give a shout, hey, Kara, how you doing? Where those of us who are actually trying to create a conversation in what is trying to be a community, we become a community when we actually know who each other are. Right now, we're a little bit anonymous. Sometimes the community is almost more like an audience, but I think a community can be pulled from the audience. And again, as talking heads, there's a little bit of performance in it. An audience is good too. So that's really kind of how, for me, the organic copyright serves a few things, is that it allows people the dignity of their intellectual property. To me, it's IP would be their inspired property. Like, in other words, you were inspired, you got it through inspiration. Of course, all inspiration comes with some perspiration. And so that's what we also acknowledge, is that there isn't just inspiration. there's also the work. There's a perspiration that goes with that. And that's a good part of what we acknowledge. The fact that Spirit put something in our head and we did what you're supposed to do with something that Spirit puts in your head, which is to share it. Okay. But if you put most people put more effort in, because that's what humans do when they're inspired. They get inspired to take this piece, and it inspires them to do a bunch of research, and they come up with a bigger piece. And that's the perspiration. But I just think that by acknowledging the different people, again, we help to create the kind of community we want, where there's respect for everybody. People know where they're getting it. This is also where you're not just a consumer. You actually know the person that produced it. This is where we start to really make a community. I consume something, whether it's an idea or whatever. This person actually went out there and tilled the field and then gave me this produce of which I then conceived. And so, through these acknowledgments of who we are, we really create some cohesion. We start creating the sharing. And a big part of, if you watch my Mystic Views with Shelley, and we have interviewed Dan Winter 4 times, and look up Dan Winter, put Dan Winter in Google and watch anything you can from him. Because you have to watch him a few times before you can really understand what he's saying. But the whole idea that a closed system or an entropic system, which doesn't take any more energy and therefore is using up what it has, that's kind of the system we have when we close things off. When you have things are open and you're open to source, and source is eternal, and it's eternal in its energy input, and you have an open source, rather than centrifugal or spinning out, which is entropic, it's centrifugal. It actually gathers things in. Actually, that whole centripetal force is really kind of what you're trying to do. Sometimes when you have moving parts that create free energy, it has to do with creating fields that actually create a 0 point, at which point things from another dimension can channel in, because there is limitless energy everywhere. So it is through sharing, it is through shouting out, it is through us being able to connect that we start to create some of that centripetal spin that we see in galaxies and we even see in hurricanes. That is the self-organizing principle. And so by sharing, we create greater organization. When we don't share, when we just put it out there, it doesn't have a coherence. It's not hooking on to something, especially if you're hooking on, like I said, somebody else has dropped an idea and you're hooking on to the idea. By acknowledging them, you are truly hooking into that also. And now you have more. Now we have coherence. Now we're creating sacred geometries. So, to me, part of the organic copyright isn't so much even just making them. If you have a great idea, I mean, to me, one idea is if you have a really involved idea, turn on Movie Maker, make a thing, get a YouTube channel, put it on a private listing, because but the day you upload it will have a date. So if you have property you really think somebody took and there was some monetization to it, and they go, well, you don't have a real copyright. Well, I uploaded this. And as we move more and more away from the spider web that we call the legal system, with its spiders waiting to get you trapped so they can suck some of the juice out of you, we can kind of start creating a more organic way of doing things. Remember, Torah is law, Tao is way. And when I look at the universe, I see the way of the universe, not the law of the universe. And so we start creating our own ways. And we respect those ways, and we make them as real a way of keeping ourselves coordinated and not violating each other as the artificial construct of the legal system, which is part of the Patrix. And I might make a Mystic Brew shot on the Patrix concept itself. But to keep this a Mystic Brew shot, I probably got to close this out now. I hope I made my point. Let's share. Let's acknowledge people when we get ideas, and if we do bring them into the public, let's start acknowledging people, especially when we're really pulling some raw material out of somebody else's work, and then bringing our own thing on it. Kick it back to where you got it. Keep the sharing going. Keep passing the buck, so to speak, in a way. And because really, for many of us doing this, the real return in investment will be in human conduct, behavior, and making a better world, in my opinion. But at the same time, practicing the respect for those of us who do things, And again, and also creating recognition. I mean, really, if we're going to build a community, we need to acknowledge who's speaking to us. And this way here, if every of us here and go, gee, I haven't really paid attention to this person or that person, you can now go, hey, let me go there. And then you realize, oh, here's another source that resonates with me. And we can really build a true interactive community, one that speaks back and forth to each other. And by bringing the respect and the integrity and some honor to it, we can start turning comment sections, which are largely fairly well run, but people will no longer, trolling will no longer be the only thing you can do, because why troll when you can actually have a conversation with somebody? And if you're going to have a conversation, you got to show some respect, the same kind of respect that you expect to get back. All right, that's it. Mystic Brew, Mystic Brew Shot. Okay, good night. God bless. God bless you.